Young lad, righteous. War can't buy great. Then craftsman so full of technique, make him feel like someone good and then alright. Show up at them night, cause we hard clean. Enough of them say them a do it, but them not do it like we. On them know for what them hear about. Warrior there to what them hear about. Open up it, they can make it hear out. Anybody not the way them a feel clear out.
Hey everyone! Today I present, What if Goku and Vegeta go into the Justice League universe, Part 2. Please enjoy. 5 years ago, the eyes of Argus. The thunderous noise of air molecules colliding with a small spaceship reverberated throughout its interior as gravity from an unknown planet pulled it towards its lithosphere. It caused the sole inhabitant of the small spacecraft, which heavily resembled a simple spherical capsule, to wake up from a deep slumber. There were no windows, so the person had no idea what was initially happening, nor was he prepared to brace himself as the capsule finally crash-landed into the planet's crust. His seatbelt fortunately kept him from moving as the capsule bore itself into the earth before finally coming to a stop. The person heard a hissing sound that slowly started to fade and proceeded to push one of the buttons inside the ship. On the capsule's side, a small door opened up and the person stumbled out of it haphazardly. The youth's face scrunched up with anger built from sheer hopelessness as he took in his surroundings. No. I failed. The young man stuttered as he clenched the handle of the broadsword he was wielding even tighter than before while starting to shake involuntarily. The entire area was ablaze. A stream was carrying lava towards lower grounds and in the distance the man could see numerous mountains spewing clouds of ash and chunks of molten rock. He stood on dark, powdery grounds that looked devoid of life and behind the lava river he could make out an ominous forest of metal trees. The sky seemed to be on fire as well, strings of orange and crimson energy danced around fiery red dots that resembled stars. There was no mistaking of where he was. This was Apocalypse, the planet of hellfire. Where are you? The youth growled as his teeth started to grind against each other. His mind and memories were still hazy, but that did not suppress his overflowing emotions. In this feral state, he did not even notice the numerous cuts, bruises and scorch marks on his exposed and fatigued body, nor did he feel the internal injuries that would inhibit any normal person from moving properly. His mind was focused solely on one thing, and that caused him to experience an emotion even worse than hatred. Darkseid. The man roared as an aura of golden plasma enveloped him. A legendary power surged through his body as his hair started to cluster and turn intensely spiky. Ash, stone and metal trees were blown away by the sheer force of the energy flares he was generating as his primal howl rung for miles around. The rumbling only stopped when the desperate man needed air to fill his tired lungs. For a small moment, which felt like an eternity to the young man, the air was quiet. Nothing except for the flow of the lava river, the explosions from the row of volcanoes in the distance and the bellowing thunder from the sulfur clouds above them were heard, but that started to change when he felt his senses tingling. The man immediately looked to the skies as he felt the presence of numerous individuals approaching him fast. Then the sound of rapidly rotating blades boomed in his ears as at least 12 strange flying metal monstrosities made themselves known and surrounded him from above. White spotlights started to point at him, momentarily blinding him. Demon Angel. Drop your weapon and surrender now. The moment you don't do as I say, we will fire. A shrill and mechanized voice of a woman ordered as the numerous aircrafts conjured various machine guns from their underbellies. The warning only seemed to make the youth's anger grow, however. How dare you? I will never surrender, Fury. I will paint the planet with your blood for what Darkseid did to her and my world. The man roared with rage while turning his head to snarl at the numerous aircrafts ready to pellet him with heavy fire. If he was going to die anyway, then he would die by tearing this planet asunder and hearing the screams of the monsters that robbed him from his home and family. So be it. All birds, fire at will. The mechanical voice screeched as a thunderstorm of metal bullets started to rain down on the golden fighter. His aura, however, proved to be an indomitable barrier that incinerated every bullet that collided with it. In response to the gunfire, the man pointed his free hand at one of the flying aircrafts. Hi-ya! He roared as a yellow energy beam was shot from his palm. The lustrous beam collided harshly against the cockpit of one of the aircrafts and detonated on impact. Chunks of flaming debris and molten metal fell from the skies as the bird was annihilated in a fiery explosion. The aircraft's remains striking the ashen ground seemed to influence the behavior of the other craft as some of them started to open their underbellies. Ropes were dispatched and numerous individuals started to slide down from them. Most of them looked human, but the warrior knew that some of Darkseid's soldiers looked human as well. The Golden Fighter did not wait for the soldiers to land and proceeded to take action. Lightning. He began as he started to fly upwards. Sword. With his broadsword in his hand, he started to point it at one of the carriers dropping off their payload. The blade started to glow white hot due to the energy that surged into it. Flash. The Golden Fighter ended as he finally let loose numerous shockwaves from his blade by slicing the air around him in sequence. The shockwaves were shot from all angles and either collided with one of the carriers, cut down the numerous ropes from the underbellies of the aircrafts, or severed various body parts from the soldiers, whose screams started to drown out the rest of the noises. He did not stop at that and rapidly cut right through the still floating aircrafts. Explosion after explosion rocketed the landscape as the man's sword tore through the metal as if it was made of paper. He only stopped his onslaught when a spark of lightning moved around his body, shocking him momentarily. When he wildly turned to the ground, he found the source of the strike. What the hell? You just withstood more than 120 kilovolts of lightning. The young man, clad in a sleeveless black jacket with a black t-shirt with a red circle printed on it, stated with surprise, but his tone sounded sinister as well. Let's put up the watts. He cackled as hands started to generate fierce strings of blue lightning and shot it at the flying warrior above him. Bam! The streak of lightning struck the warrior and a cloud of smoke was formed around him. The superpowered soldier started to smirk when the warrior was gone after the smoke cleared. And Voltaic just turned his Frito. The wielder of lightning never managed to indulge himself in his euphoria, because he was brutally beheaded with a rapid strike from the Golden Fighter's broadsword. The man's fierce green eyes showed no mercy as he kicked the rest of the body away from him and crushed the lightning-powered youth's head. All around him, the other strange apocalyptians hesitated to move towards him, despite their unique and dangerous abilities. Remember, Task Force X, managing to take him down will result in the erasure of your criminal record and a bank account of $1 billion. From behind the groups of soldiers, a dark-skinned woman clad in a black Special Ops outfit walked towards the front, with 3 other prominent-looking individuals following behind her. It was the voice of the woman from earlier, but lacking the mechanized tone. Her voice immediately managed to ignite the Golden Fighter's fury, but her words also seemed to stir the soldiers' minds awake. Together we can take him. One of the soldiers roared as the ones next to him joined in to boost their morals. That's right, ye criminal dipsticks. With that amount of cash, you won't have to worry about pension. Not only that, you can buy all the cars you want, buy all the alcohol and drugs you need and fuck all the hookers 3 times a day, forever. The young man's eyes turned to a fury who had pearly white skin, blonde hair tied in 2 ponytails whose tips were colored red and blue respectively, and wielded a giant hammer that had the stamp of a clown on its face. She's right, boys. All the women we want. One of the criminals smirked, which managed to ignite the passion of the rest of the lot. It infuriated the Golden Warrior that these apocalyptians were as horrible as the criminals that lurked in the shadows of his world, ready to rob and hurt anyone who couldn't protect themselves. Monsters, all of you. There was no remorse from your kin as they tore through the innocent families. Even children were not safe from your sadistic onslaught. I will avenge all of them, he declared as he prepared himself to face an army of remorseless criminals. Tilda Siberia, Russian Federation, 5 years later. The dark-skinned woman watched confidently as she stood in the snow, while a large group of Harpians let loose their destructive powers to fight an alien threat with a demonic glare that crumbled the hearts of the weak-willed. She showed no compassion as the monstrous demon angel cut through the criminals with his heavy-looking broadsword, while sometimes letting loose an energy blast that incinerated anyone who was unfortunate enough to cross its path. Waller, I hope you know what you're doing. The woman looked to her right upon hearing the distorted voice of one of her best task force ex-soldiers. A man clad in a skin-tight armored suit that was black and red in coloration eyed her carefully. He wore a robotic mask with a mechanical right eye color, the blood red, that was made using the latest military technology. The expensive piece of gadgetry helped the man immensely with his old expertise. In his hands he wielded a modified M107 sniper rifle, specialized to fire a certain type of bullet. Waller glanced at the magazine, which glowed a sickly green, before turning to face the man. This is the moment that we have all been waiting for, Deadshot. More than $60 billion was invested in this operation alone, from preparing the lab for containment of arguably the most powerful being on the planet to financing the kryptonite bullets that you're currently authorized to use at my command. When our scientists discovered this spaceship whose inhabitant showed to have a similar energy signature as the ones from 5 years ago heading to Earth, we needed to take action immediately, even if it could escalate into war between us and Russia. Waller answered as she turned her head towards the noises of the battlefield. I am not worried about Russia, Amanda. Ever heard of the Justice League, by any chance? The marksman retorted sarcastically as Amanda watched another inmate heaving his last breath as he was diagonally sliced apart. They won't come. Our latest intel has shown Superman and Green Lantern heading to space in a hurry. The Flash is busy protecting his city from the rogues, Aquaman is currently in the Atlantic, Cyborg's senses are being diverted with the help of our latest viruses, created by LexCorp. Batman has been confirmed to be in Gotham City and Wonder Woman hasn't been seen for months, so I don't expect her to appear anytime soon. This leaves us with enough time to properly contain this asset. Amanda ended with a smile on her face. Her thoughts temporarily shifted to the destruction of Metropolis from 5 years ago. That catastrophic battle had triggered a wave of metahuman and alien appearances in the coming years that the world simply wasn't ready for. The US government came with a proposal towards the rest of the world, and thus, Argus was founded officially. Steve Trevor functioned as the agency's head and not only held authority over the so-called Red and Black Rooms, but also acted as a liaison to the Justice League to keep the peace. Amanda Waller, however, had a different job inside Argus. She was tasked to contain the rising metahuman population by overseeing the metahuman prison of Belle Reve located in Louisiana and what the criminals called L'Enfant d'Espoir, the secret laboratory under Belle Reve that had one sole function: the creation of their very own Justice League. Scientists were baffled by the ridiculous display of power from the aliens that clashed in Metropolis, and the world, especially the United States, desperately desired control of the situation to prepare for a second war with the divine being known as Darkseid. To manage that, the laboratory under Belle Reve was created where many scientists, most of them being shunned by the world due to their controversial methods of acquiring knowledge, were able to freely experiment on metahumans to either understand the nature of their power, or create their own metahumans by playing God. Many powerful metahumans were secretly caught by her suicide squad, ready to be modified into their own super weapons. There was one ingredient missing, however, that was supposed to function as the squad's leader. And that ingredient was currently painting Siberia's snow with the blood of Belle Reve's prisoners. It was incredibly convenient that at this current moment the Justice League was nowhere to be found, because if they were, this would turn into huge scandal with a lawsuit at best and full-out war against the current mightiest beings on this planet at worst. Mandy, if this continues on, then we'll be wishing that the Justice League was there. That demon angel is ripping them apart like King Shark does his meals. Amanda turned to her left to see the deranged smile of Harley Quinn, the Joker's damsel who was placed into Belle Reve's grounds when Batman brought her in for the 7th time due to her escaping Arkham Asylum continuously. She was pointing at a massive beast behind her, who looked like an anthropomorphic hammerhead with huge muscles and razor-sharp teeth. King Shark was shivering in the snow, probably due to him having an ectothermic metabolism. Don't worry, there's someone ready to take down the demon angel when he finishes with his tantrum. Amanda simply replied as she witnessed the Golden Fighter snapping the neck of one of the last metahumans, squaring off against him and subsequently blasting the body to smithereens. The energy blast he generated from his palm traveled a bit further than probably intended and collided with the conifer forest close from here. Trees were ripped apart by the force of the blast, and it made Waller wonder just how powerful these golden warriors truly were. "You mean that guy? That's King Shark's daddy, right?" Harley Quinn asked as she pointed at a monstrous behemoth who resembled a large, sea blue-colored bipedal amphibian with electricity coursing around him. On his body he had various painted markings that glowed blue whenever the monster took a step on the cold snow. This behemoth was the last one standing of the prisoners and currently served as the only wall between the bloodlusted demon and Waller. Kamo, yes, our self-proclaimed Hawaiian deity, but I'm not talking about him. Still, Kamo should be more than enough to keep the demon angel on his toes. Amanda began with a smirk as the monster known as Kamo stampeded towards the demon angel and was ready to deliver a right hook that coursed with electricity. He did manage to hit the Golden Fighter, but he wasn't even able to budge the alien. In response, and with a rapid twist of his body, the demon angel severed Kamo's torso from the rest of his body, before slicing the Hawaiian deity into cold cuts. Before the monster's last remains could fall in the snow, the swordsman generated a wide energy blast that reduced them to ash. His eyes then fixated on the last 4 people remaining. Or not. Waller muttered in disbelief as she finally started to realize how much she had underestimated this wounded warrior. "That person needs to come ASAP if we want to survive, Waller." Deadshot growled as he pointed his sniper at the approaching demon angel. The group could clearly see the muscled alien ready to take off and rip them apart, but he suddenly shifted his focus at something in the distance. Waller immediately sighed in relief. "Just in time, it seems. We should retreat to a safe location, because a standoff is going to take place that could potentially the whole of Siberia," she stated as she watched her strongest soldier landing in the cold snow, a few meters in front of the demon angel, readying himself for a cataclysmic battle. The young man slowly, but methodically stepped over the remains of the apocalyptians he had cut down mere moments ago while gazing murderously at the last group of monsters, but he simply could not ignore his senses when he felt something ominously powerful approaching. Suddenly, and with him barely realizing, a strange individual landed on the ashen ground in front of him. His skin looked like onyx, colored a dark shade of blue. Around his body, streams of liquid lava flowed and centered on his torso in the shape of a star. His eyes were fierce and colored crimson. Those eyes looked the same as. "Why you?" The youth seethed as his aura started to grow more intense. He watched as the Fury and her henchmen started to retreat, but he paid them no mind. "Greetings, Demon Angel. I am known as Wraith, and I advise you to surrender now. You have 3 fractured ribs and your muscle fibers are full of tears. Those other metas weren't able to hurt you, but you will realize that my power is even beyond that of the Kryptonian. Truly, in your current state, you stand no chance," the dark blue behemoth stated calmly as he stood his ground. "I've fought with worse injuries than this and I will never back down. Especially not to one of Darkseid's heirs. I will make you suffer for what your father did," the young man declared as he pointed his broadsword at the being known as Wraith. "And you clearly are in a delusional state, but I don't think my words will get through you. No, I have to be a bit more unreserved. I always wondered how it felt to not hold back every time." The fatigued Golden Fighter was barely able to react when the monster known as Wraith delivered a brutal punch to his guts. His eyes almost bulged out of his sockets as he was launched away. When he finally managed to stop his momentum, Wraith was immediately ready to deliver another brutal blow. This time, the youth was ready. Whoosh! The young man noticed Wraith's surprise when he managed to move behind him, while leaving an afterimage in his wake. With a heavy kick to the back, Wraith was launched away in turn. The youth immediately realized that something was terribly wrong. Why did he feel like he was hitting Katchin all over again? He quickly forced his surprised thoughts into the back of his head as he rushed towards the still flying individual, and with a powerful upwards kick he launched the monster to the skies. Using his golden powers, he materialized high above the still flying individual and readied his broadsword. Die! He screamed as he vertically sliced his sword down, ready to tear through Wraith with one powerful slice. Clang! The youth's furious gaze turned into shock as he witnessed the apocalypse swiftly turning his body and blocking the strike with his forearm. His blade cut deep through Wraith's flesh, but it stopped when he hit bone. A metallic clang was heard as his blade started to vibrate. As the youth tried to pull his blade free, two red beams from the monster's eyes were fired at his torso, scorching his exposed chest and sending him flying with his blade still stuck in the monster's forearm. Immediately he witnessed Darkseid's son chasing after him, while pulling the blade from his underarm. The Golden Fighter had no time to react when Wraith appeared in front of him and cleaved the warrior's torso with his own sword. Then, the dark blue monster delivered a haymaker with his free arm that sent him tumbling to the ground. The young man could do nothing as his body crashed into the ground. A small crater had been formed and the youth was wheezing heavily from the pain. A lot more of his ribs felt broken thanks to the monster's heavy strike, and blood was flowing from the gaping wound that lay diagonally from his left shoulder to the right underside of his breast. I warned you, demon. You stand no chance. The broken warrior heard as he saw his blade piercing the ground next to him as the apocalypse levitated in front of him. While he forced himself to stay awake, he watched as the monster's wound started to disappear completely. It reminded him on an old nemesis that sparked his resolve into an even brighter flame. He was out of energy and he felt his body ready to crumble, but there was still something that he had not yet given. Even when your body is beyond your breaking point, you still manage to generate such vast amounts of power. Your imprisonment is indeed necessary to keep this world safe. The behemoth stated as the energy around his core started to move around his entire body. The youth felt the monster's energy signature starting to become more prominent, but that did not stop him from crawling out of the crater. Mother, Gohan, Father, Goku. Give me strength. I will end his reign. The youth pleaded as he felt the depth of his soul starting to power up his entire being. Ah! The Golden Warrior roared as his already spiky hair started to turn even more rigid, while bluish lightning started to cackle around him, ionizing the sickly air around him. Wraith, knock him out, now! The youth's ears picked up the sound of the fury through his own screams, but ignored it as he pushed himself to even greater heights than before, for the second time in his life. This ends now! Wraith roared as orange and crimson energies leaked from his body when he took off, ready to knock the demon angel out with a brutal punch. He wasn't ready for the Golden Warrior's retaliation, however. Before Wraith's punch hit home, the delusional warrior expertly sidestepped and proceeded to deliver a roundhouse kick to the apocalypse demon's torso. As Wraith was sent flying, the youth started to move upwards. I will avenge everyone, even if it costs me my life. The Golden Warrior roared as the wind started to pick up when he gathered ridiculous amounts of energy in his bombs. When he saw Wraith finally recovering, he let it all go. Masenko! The youth finally roared as he shot a yellow beam of energy at Darkseid's son. It immediately collided with the monster, who was unable to dodge it in time. Subsequently, the entire world started to shake. Amanda could not believe her eyes as she tried her best to keep herself balanced from the shaking of the earth. She had only seen it on video files, but witnessing an energy beam from this close, ready to tear the planet asunder, was something else entirely. Deadshot, shoot the kryptonite bullets! She roared through the fierce surging of the demon angel's area as she watched Wraith trying desperately to push the beam back. If this blast managed to come through Wraith, the entire planet would be destroyed. On it, Waller! Deadshot immediately replied as he used his expert marksman skills to stay balanced despite the shaking of the ground. Loud bangs were heard as numerous green glowing bullets were shot at the golden light in the sky, but even the durable kryptonite was incinerated when it collided with the demon angel's golden barrier. Fuck! Now what, Amanda? You just had to poke the wrong hornet's nest. Deadshot cursed as he was unable to keep himself balanced anymore. Cracks started to form on the ground as the Suicide Squad witnessed Wraith being pushed further into the planet's crust. Well, it was good while it lasted. Harley Quinn cackled as she simply watched the spectacle unfold with a goofy smile on her face, while King Shark stood stiff on the snowy ground as hypothermia loomed ever closer over the hammerhead, barely reacting to the madness around him. Waller could only watch with a grimace on her face as she lamented herself for being unprepared despite the odds. She had expected Wraith to be able to deal with the warrior, but these demon angels seemed to defy all the odds. Their power source wasn't some external fuel from the stars. No, it came from inside them. Her scientists were constantly debating whether their power was mystical or scientific in nature. What they did know, though, thanks to the numerous secret footage of the Battle of Metropolis, was that their power source was finite. Waller's smirk slowly started to resurface as she refocused and scanned the demon angel thoroughly. Interesting. She muttered as she witnessed the warrior's golden aura starting to become less prominent. He slowly became visible again through his area, and Waller used a set of binoculars to properly assess even further what was happening to the youth. "Lucky us, the bastard is looking tired," Deadshot remarked as Amanda saw the youth's stance starting to slacken. This caused his energy beam to weaken as well, which was the perfect opportunity for Wraith to push the beam back. "Wraith, this is your chance. Knock him out," Waller roared as she saw Wraith slowly starting to pierce through the beam, while gaining speed. Eventually, he arrived in front of the mysterious warrior, and with a brutal punch to the face, the youth was launched to the ground. Immediately the rumbling stopped as the young man's golden hair turned lavender when he fell in the snow. Wraith levitated above his foe to scan whether he was conscious, but that didn't seem to be the case at all. "If he was healthy, you would have lost horribly, Wraith," Amanda stated as she kicked the man's head for good measure when arrived at the scene of the crime. Wraith looked extremely worn, with his skin showing third-degree burns, but due to his physiology heavily resembling that of a Kryptonian, he already started to heal. "A sunbath is the only thing I need to take on this foe," Wraith replied as calmly started at his fallen enemy. "Harley, Deadshot, prepare the demon angel for containment. Wraith, gather his belongings," Amanda simply stated as she grabbed a radio from her pocket. "This is Mother Wall, over, asset ready to be extracted," she hissed through the comm. "Copy that, Mother, extraction ETA 10 minutes," the comm replied as Amanda sighed, while watching her suicide squad cuffing the unconscious warrior, while Wraith was pulling the man's ship out of its crater. She herself simply decided to look at the aurora that was dancing above them in a colorful greenish hue with a haughty smirk on her face. To her, tonight was a successful night. Tilda the Batcave, Gotham City. The rapid ticking on a keyboard echoed throughout a massive cavern as a tall and imposing individual scanned the information on the various screens of his computer. The cavern was located right under Wayne Manor and served as the headquarters of the most feared vigilante in all of Gotham. The Batman growled audibly at video footage as his bat drone continued to record the task force ex-soldiers cleaning the devastated area in Siberia to erase traces of a catastrophic battle that had taken place. Body parts of the fallen Argus soldiers were piled on top of each other and subsequently incinerated by the Superman imposter known as Wraith, while real Argus agents were placing the Scion in some sort of tube in liquid, while connecting his body through a computer system using various infusions for experimentation and monitoring purposes. As much as Bruce hated the loss of life inflicted by the delusional Scion, he could only sympathize with him if his words spoke true of the trauma he had sustained. The God of Evil wasn't seen or heard from for years now, but that didn't mean that the God of Evil was simply biding his time. Waller only made the situation worse by immediately engaging the distraught warrior, believing that she stood a chance due to having that elusive alien known as Wraith on her side. Not much was really known of this Wraith. The few things that Batman could find were files of someone having the same powers as this Wraith acting as the Nagasaki bomb during World War II. Either Wraith's species had a very long lifespan or this was the older one's son. Before Batman's mind could come up with further theories, his Bat computer alarmed him of a presence inside his home. "How was your trip into space?" the Bat asked immediately as his voice resonated throughout the vast cavern. "I was initially surprised that Hal needed my help while he has an entire corps watching his back, but when I arrived, well." From one of the darkest corners of the cave, a floating man wearing a blue bodysuit, A red cape and the symbol of an S on his chest appeared and landed a few meters behind the Dark Knight, who turned his head in response. Who was he? Batman asked as his most trusted friend hesitated to answer it properly. He called himself Hellspawn, a demonite overlord or something like that. He had a massive army hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and was ready to lay siege on our home. He was searching for them and said something about a spherical artifact surging with divine power. We managed to fight him off with the help of not only the Green Lantern Corps, but also a strange group of heroes who called themselves Stormwatch. Unfortunately, he's still out there and probably planning to raid our planet in search of answers in the near future. Superman debriefed as he scratched his chin and thought. His assumptions might not be far off regarding the artifact. Batman simply replied as he opened up a few files of various locations on Earth. Superman rapidly scanned the various maps and tilted his head in confusion. Themyscira. Nanda Parbat. Kahdak? What's this, Bruce? Possible locations of an artifact Diana calls a Dragon Ball. It is what she's been trying to locate for months now. She believes that the artifact will lead us to the whereabouts of our Scion allies from 5 years ago. I assume that the artifact is magical in nature, so I helped her out by narrowing down on various mythical locations that's supposed to reside on this planet. Bruce answered as he allowed Superman to read through the various files. She's still searching for them, isn't she? Even after all this time, after all our efforts to find them, she never gave up hope. She never told us what she felt when one of them touched her lasso and what she heard before they left our planet. What awakened inside her heart that caused her to be enthralled by their existence? Superman wondered with a sad smile as he turned towards his friend. Batman didn't answer him and showed Superman the video footage of what had transpired during the Man of Steel's absence. It doesn't matter what she felt during that time. I hope that her intuition is right. Look at this, Clark. Argus has crossed the line. Batman stated as he played the video 20 times its normal speed. Kal-El's face contorted into various emotional states as he watched the footage of the Golden Fighter cleaving numerous metahumans in half, before falling at the hands of the being known as Wraith. They have a scion, a different one, Clark. This one is clearly suffering from a severe case of PTSD from a trauma suffered at the hands of Darkseid. Darkseid, a name that struck fear into the hearts of many in this universe. Every alien that he came across ever since the Parademon invasion has heard of this almighty and evil monarch. Superman never truly hated someone, but even he could make an exception just this once. Diana and Cyborg especially were disgusted by that divine monster's horrendous acts in the name of conquest, due to them having witnessed Darkseid's atrocities the best. Before Superman could get lost deeper into his thoughts, Batman started to speak again. They're going to weaponize him, Clark. If we don't stop them and our old allies find out, it means war. Bruce, I know. Did you manage to find where Argus has taken him and the various other captured metahumans? Superman then asked as he clenched his fist in anger. There's a laboratory located under Belle Reve. They've reinforced its walls with lead to prevent you from looking through it, but Batgirl and Red Robin managed to hack into its computer systems for a small moment. They acquired some interesting reports and profiles of the metahuman Argus is experimenting on. Superman's eyes started to glow fiercely as he read about not only criminals that the Justice League has personally stopped from terrorizing the planet, but also various alien species and innocent people who possessed the so-called metagen. The strongest or most unique ones were experimented on inside that laboratory, while the others functioned as the so-called Suicide Squad. These people were forced to work for Argus in exchange for their freedom, but in reality the mortality rate was basically 100%. They're afraid, Clark, especially of you and the two Scions hiding somewhere in this multiverse. Their fear is what's driving them to create their own super soldiers. It's in our nature to be afraid of a higher power. We cannot risk a metahuman war between ourselves. Innocent lives will be lost and we would quickly fall victim to extraterrestrial threats. What if Brainiac returns, or Darkseid even? And now, we have this Hellspawn to worry about as well. Batman calmly explained as the world's finest contemplated their options. If they're truly experimenting on metas, then we cannot let this injustice slide. It's not even about the Scion, it's about everyone who's been captured, tortured and experimented on. Argus. Believe that their authority is above basic human rights, which is truly horrible. However, if we address this situation, it will cost us our proved autonomy and compromise the entire foundation we have built up over the years for fighting crime throughout the entire planet. Superman mused as he continued to read the files, before turning back to Batman. Does Steve even know about this? I cannot fathom him having anything to do with this, despite his problems with Diana. Clark began as he walked around his friend to face him properly. Colonel Trevor doesn't know. Argus is using him as a puppet, but he could help us bring this to light. That way, we could formally initiate a lawsuit that would potentially minimize the damage. And if that doesn't work? Superman finally asked as he crossed his arms. Then I do what I'm good at. Batman ended as he walked away from the computer, leaving Superman to wonder how much the world had changed in the wake of Darkseid's invasion. Far away, in the depths of space. The uproarious laughter, wails and boos of a massive crowd of various alien species felt like music to the ears of a short and lithe individual as his punch pierced right through the gut of his latest victim, a tall and pink-skinned humanoid with a black ponytail. What are you? The pink-skinned warrior wheezed before his body was ignited by a sudden burst of energy, leaving only ash. The remaining fighter eyed his surroundings with a smirk on his face as food, weaponry and even feces was thrown at him from all angles of the Colosseum, but everything merely bounced off from the man's wide surging aura. While ignoring the crowd for a moment, the individual turned to a balcony where a yellow-colored titan glared furiously at him. He was the self-proclaimed emperor of this place, a gigantic spherical machine known as Warworld. It was a feared place throughout the entire universe, but that did not stop the small warrior from heading inside it. This planetoid housed something that the warrior desperately craved, and he was only going to leave when he had it in his hands. So, Emperor Mongol, did you truly consider these lowlifes to be a match for me? If I did not know any better, I would believe that you were underestimating me. Now, I believe I have earned that ball. The warrior boasted as he gave Mongol a haughty smirk. One more fight, puny man. Mongol answered as he was seething profusely. The small warrior gave the alien warlord a curious look when he saw the emperor jumping off his balcony. The ground began to shake when he landed, cracking the stone due to his heavy stature. The crowd around the two began to clap and whistle loudly, which made the puny man chuckle. I was wondering when the big boss finally decided to do his own dirty work. I give you 1 minute at best before I've pounded your ugly face into the ground. The small warrior taunted as his long, flaming hair fluttered due to his white aura. He witnessed the behemoth slowly heading towards him with a mighty battle axe in his hand and was ready to take his signature battle stance, but a tingling in his senses momentarily distracted him. He turned to the open skies, which revealed only starlight, while gazing at something unseeable in the distance. Oh, trying to escape now, little one? Close the dome. Mongol roared as the flame-haired warrior saw a massive metal roof being placed on top of the Colosseum, closing the entrance from above. No, that can't be Kakarot. The warrior muttered while ignoring the display before finally turning to his opponent. He would have to ponder about what he sensed later. He had a mission to complete. I've heard tales of your exploits, little one. You claim to be the strongest being in the universe, feared by even the Guardians for your godly might, but I only see a puny human, a monkey even. I don't even need my yellow ring to best you. Mongol smirked as the crowd's obnoxious laughter echoed throughout the dome. Oh, you are questioning my claims of superiority over the likes of you? Well then, let me show you firsthand the true power of the Prince of all Scions. The smirking warrior ended as his white horse started to flicker into a golden light. Belle Reve, Louisiana, 1 month later. A perpetual scream echoed throughout the halls and chambers of a massive underground facility, its sound waves never going further than the walls encompassing the compound. It wasn't just a bone-chilling scream of agony, or a cry for help that wasn't going to come. No, this was a scream of resignation, of finally losing hope. One, of giving up, Next came the sobbing that soon quieted down to merely a whimper as the owner of the broken scream lied on her side, pulled her knees up, and started rocking back and forth to console herself. Even with her incredibly powerful physiology, her body, mind and soul simply couldn't bear the heartless torture for eternity. Her will was bound to break apart eventually. Subject A025, designated Starfire, has not shown sufficient feats of durability at the desired threshold to implement into the PMA's operating system. Other species required to fill in said gap, stated the monotonous voice of a pulsing computer connected to the room the research subject was housed in. Implement the observations and results of her UV absorption and manipulation abilities into the database. Increase the amount of radiation in the next session. I also want a profile of the intricacies of her cellular behavior during absorption, replied the cold voice of a bald man with a deformed head, who pushed a bright red button on the computer's control panel rather dismissively. Immediately, two humanoid droids with the only feature on their face being a bright red Terminator eye, headed inside the observation room and grabbed the whimpering alien by her arms, subsequently dragging her back to her cell. The bald scientist paid the alien no mind as he gnashed his teeth in anger and walked out of the observation room. He did not care in the slightest about his subject's health, only about results. Computer, give me a report on the PMA's current hypothetical abilities and functions, the man declared as he bypassed rows upon rows of specially designed prison cells containing various alien and metahuman specimens. Affirmative, Professor Ivo. Downloading files now, replied the computer as the professor headed inside another room, where another bald man in a white lab coat was studying a broadsword, which had been in possession of one of the subjects here. The man in question had only one functioning eye, because his right eye had a vertical scar in the form of a lightning bolt. Professor Ivo promptly ignored his colleague as he took a seat at one of the tables and grabbed his tablet. Through the piece of technology, he heard the voice of his personal computer. Files downloaded, would you like me to summarize the findings? It asked. Naturally, now proceed. Ivo growled as he paid close attention to the tables and graph which were being displayed. The PMA's operating system, unlike its predecessor, does not contain metagen-replicating enzymes that are triggered by exposure of metahuman abilities through sensory perception. Instead, various genes that code into supernatural abilities are already implemented into its complex synthetic DNA structure. This can potentially result in stronger and more stable power manifestations and abilities, but at the cost of diversity. I already know that, I wrote it myself. Give me a chart, including the donor of each ability. Ivo growled as the computer did what it was told. Immediately the professor scanned through it, while the computer spoke to him the intricacies out loud. Subject A025's, designated Starfire, unique physiological abilities such as linguistic assimilation and UV absorption that enhances her natural abilities have been replicated into PMA's DNA structure, despite her durability not reaching the desired threshold. Her power to expel blasts of solar energy, dubbed starbolts, are still being implemented. Her DNA structure indicates that it is not a natural Tamranian ability, but a manifestation as a result of older experiments into her DNA which weren't done here. The gene for said ability is still being researched. Good, warn me when it's finished. I would like to test that ability out. Continue. The professor stated anxiously as he himself continued to read. PMA's electrokinesis is derived from subject TAMO13, designated COMO. No other abilities of significance have been found in the short time he was under experimentation, other than his amphibious physiology. And what about subjects MO22, MO23, MO24 and A033? Subject MO22, designated Raven, has been a difficult case. Dr. Savannah has been tasked with acquiring the necessary knowledge, due to most of her abilities being magical in nature. Currently, we have only been able to isolate the genes and replicate her affinity for magic that are derived of her being the Homo Magi. However, the metahuman genes of subjects MO23 and O24, designated Kid Flash and Terra, have been successfully implemented without any repercussions. The mechanical voice ended. Professor Ivor started to fidget with his lab coat as he waited for more information, which did not seem to come. And? A033? He finally asked, almost snarling. Subject A033, designated demon angel, does not have any profitable abilities to include into the PMA's operating system. What? Give me his profile. Explain this, now. The professor seethed as he received a chart. When he scanned it thoroughly, he angrily discarded the tablet into the nearest wall. No sufficient powers and abilities? His kin's power displays shook the entire planet. They shot beams containing more energy than we could generate in a decade. Ivo snarled as he wiped the sweat off his bald head. He quickly headed towards the nearest monitor to reevaluate the alien's profile. Subject A033's biochemical reactions are heavily similar to Homo sapiens and do not show any significant results, even when incited by boosts of adrenaline. Although his bones seem to be of a higher density and his metabolic rate is higher than that of the average human, the demon angel currently hasn't shown any significant powers to implement. But you can clearly see that his cells possess an extra organelle next to the mitochondria. His blood also contains hormones that are not found in humans, probably to incite the transformation where his hair turns gold. I want his unique DNA structure to be implemented, despite the lack of significant findings. If only Waller let me wake him up for experimentation. Professor Ivo growled as he walked away from the monitor and back to the table. Before he reached it, his colleague suddenly started to speak up. I see that your lack of knowledge regarding the demon angel's power manifestations has resulted in a lack of improvement to your android, Professor Ivo. Do not patronize me, Doctor. You do not seem to be doing any better yourself with your personal goals, considering the lack of a viable cure for your family's illness. Professor Ivo answered, while he took a seat. Dr. Savannah's eyes glowered for a moment, but eventually decided to remain courteous. I find it rather curious that your android does not contain any Kryptonian DNA. You did specify a durability problem after all. It would also alleviate a potential strength and flight problem as well. Dr. Savannah began as he took a seat at the other side of the table. No other Kryptonians, other than Superman, have been sighted. It would be most fortunate if I got my hands on a DNA sample, replied the professor as he turned towards his colleague. What about Wraith? His powers seem to be rather similar. That would have been an excellent proposition, if not for my lack of ability and authority to get it. Waller keeps him on a tight leash. Both the doctor and professor sighed heavily at that statement. Despite the perks of being part of this research facility as the two highest station scientists, the amount of authority and control they had left much to be desired. The extremely strong creatures such as Wraith and the Demon Angel were generally off limits to experiment on. Wraith, because he was Waller's right hand, while the risk for waking the Demon Angel was simply too high, for Waller at least. So now you're just mindlessly torturing your subjects to make your androids stronger? Dr. Savannah inquired dismissively as he stood up. I don't care about their feelings, their wants and needs. I want results, I want immortality, I know. I still wonder why that android is necessary for that goal. Not that I care, that is none of my business of course. Dr. Savannah said as he typed a few notes on his own tablet. Meanwhile, Professor Ivo kept staring at him irritably. What is the point of this conversation, Thaddeus? If you do not have something useful to say, then please extradite yourself from my presence. Professor Ivo eventually growled as he stood up. In response, Dr. Savannah smiled smugly. Now, let's not get hasty here, Anthony. I am here to improve that android on behalf of our dear executive. I have uploaded the results of my experimentations on subject M022. Now, I have all the time to work on our biggest mystery. Please, follow me. Dr. Savannah urged as he stood up and motioned his colleague to follow him. Eventually, they came at a stop in front of an experimental setup, where the broadsword Savannah was researching was being displayed. To Ivo, the object didn't look any different from a general sword, but Dr. Savannah was nonetheless enthusiastic. Look at the results of the XRF scan. This blade is partly of a metal that's never seen before. It is extremely durable, yet significantly ductile and malleable. It barely loses its sharpness as well, and I haven't been able to find its melting point yet. The doctor inquired admirably, to which Anthony snorted. Do you study metallurgy, or magic? I don't care about the intricacies of this blade. Professor Ivor snorted. He was about to turn around when Dr. Savannah interrupted him. I am not finished, Professor. This blade also contains faint trails of magic, and more importantly, another type of energy. Something that practically no one on this planet utilizes. That part is interesting to you, Professor. The doctor stated as he headed out of the room towards a different part of the laboratory. Using a set of passwords and identification cards, he managed to open the 5-meter-thick titanium doors blocking the two scientists' path. Eventually, they arrived in front of a large tube containing a greenish liquid. Inside the tube was a dormant person with lavender hair, wearing an oxygen face mask. His entire body was connected to wires that uploaded his bodily activities towards the main computer. We have been looking at this alien's powers the wrong way. The incredible amounts of power he generates are only partially explainable when you look at his genome. The secret is a bit more metaphysical than that. What are you implying, Doctor? That he utilizes some form of energy that is neither scientifically or magically explainable. Professor Ivo asked as he squinted his eyes at the lavender-haired man sleeping in the tube. I believe it is a combination of both. The faint trails of mystical energy I found on the blade line up with his natural energy signature. Dr. Savannah stated as he opened the alien's biological profile on the monitor. Although his genome contains certain interesting attributes, such as a gene for a fifth limb, higher bone density and even an organelle that might be used to transform into his golden state, his planet-destroying powers do not necessarily come from that. I believe that he is utilizing spiritual energy that only the monks of Asia have been studying for centuries. They call it ki or chi. The doctor ended. Professor Ivo was silent for a moment, but eventually started to laugh. Ki? What nonsense are you talking about, Doctor? This is an extraterrestrial, not a monk. Do you have a better explanation, Professor? From analyses of the footage we have, you can clearly see that he conjures energy from an unknown source. Why does his anger increase the amount of energy leaking from his body? Where is the source of this energy? Have you found any type of organelles that absorb radiation that is similar to a Kryptonian or Tamronian? Thaddeus asked knowingly. And what if your theory is correct? How do you intend to test your hypothesis? Professor Ivo inquired. The monks believe that this spiritual energy comes from the very soul and can be triggered by emotion. In order to see if it's true, we merely need to wake him up and inside his temporal lobe. Waller's specifically told us that. Waller's not here now, is she? She's dealing with the Justice League. We just wake him up for a moment. If it does go wrong, we can easily absorb the energy he generates through the tubes. Dr. Savannah stated. At first, Professor Ivo looked apprehensive. Despite his cold exterior, he was actually extremely afraid of the metahumans which were housed here. They could kill him on a whim, and he was afraid of the very notion of death. Then again, his android would never be complete if he couldn't test the full extent of the donor's capabilities. Eventually, he resigned. Fine, I'll stop the flow of narcotics into his system. The professor stated, a smirk forming on his face at the prospect of completing his android. He needed only to press a button and type in a few passwords to stop the flow of the mini liquids going through the alien's infusions. Now, we simply have to wait for it to wake up. Dr. Savannah ended as the two scientists waited anxiously for a sign of awakening. It didn't take long before the demon angel opened his eyes. United States Capitol, Washington D.C. For the longest time, Superman kept floating a few kilometers above Washington, D.C., contemplating about what was soon going to happen. The clear blue sky, warm rays of sunshine and cool breeze were an antithesis towards the darkness of the current situation, and Superman was far from comfortable. Today was the lawsuit, or something akin to that. It was actually going to be more of a tense meeting or debate between opposing superpowers, which was disappointing, but expected. Its sole theme was of course about the events that had happened around 5 years ago and the powerhouses who partook in these events, in particular the Golden Warriors. He and Batman initially tried to accuse Argus of the numerous abductions and experiments they had done over the years. The footage Batman managed to acquire incited only one word into the Man of Steel's mind: torture. Horrible, needless torture. But due to lots of bureaucracy and nepotism, Amanda Waller managed to twist their pleas for justice into an accusation of withholding important information regarding the aftermath of the Battle of Metropolis. As powerful as the Justice League was, they had no control over the internal politics of the United States, so this result was, like he thought earlier, expected. Superman still found it surreal that the government allowed this cruelty to stand in the first place. Didn't they realize that what they were doing was against everything that America stood for, especially freedom and human rights? Was their lack of control and fear of beings like him truly enough to justify kidnapping and experimenting on metahumans and aliens, to create some sort of anti-Justice League? In some ways, Kal-El can understand. Compared to him, a human was just so weak and fragile. They were practically powerless if he ever went rogue. But there lied the problem now, didn't it? Did he have more right to live compared to an average human, just because he could lift the entire planet or fly faster than a photon? Of course not. All life is precious, yet only a few people seem to feel the same way as he, unfortunately. Sometimes he wished he could just snap his fingers and make the world realize that happiness, trust and kindness were far more important than power. That is what the Justice League tried to represent by helping those in need. It was important that the world could trust in them again, and that they have the people's best interests at heart. In order to do that, some secrets were needed to be addressed. Today, the truth of the demon angels would come to light. And it was something the world wasn't going to like. Kal-El still remembered that time when they first appeared vividly. How could he not? Literally the entire planet was under attack by a malevolent god by the name of Darkseid. It was humanity's darkest hour in at least 2,000 years, yet so suddenly two rays of golden light came out of nowhere and gave the world a fighting chance to banish back the darkness. For 5 years, the League led the world to believe that they were angels containing God's demonic wrath and desire for justice, but in reality they were the same as Kal. They were aliens, a race called the Scions. From what they had shown, they were more powerful than a solar-powered Kryptonian. Superman was sure that Amanda had already figured out that there was nothing divine about them when she managed to capture one to experiment on. There was simply nothing Superman could do to prevent it. Had he not been fighting Hellspawn back then, he could have helped him. Now, they had to do this legally. Well, mostly legally. It was hypocritical, but some things just had to be done in secrecy. Batman's squadron of youngsters was currently infiltrating Belle Reve to secure the Scion, and while they're at it, every other innocent meta and alien that is being contained there. If the world found out, the League would be put under even higher scrutiny, but it was a necessary step to take to ensure Earth's survival. Because as noble the two Scions had sounded initially, one of them seemed far from it. Superman could hardly believe it when Hal Jordan showed him the hacked footage he acquired from one of the yellow rings of one of the Sinestro Corps members. It showed a battle of a massive yellow alien warlord fighting one of the Scion warriors. In reality, it wasn't even a battle. It was a one-sided onslaught. Superman knew the warlord himself. His name was Mongol, the supreme monarch of a planetary-sized warship known as Warworld. He wielded a yellow lantern ring that was not under Sinestro's authority. They had been at odds for as long he could remember. Superman once fought the behemoth, and if not for the help of some of the League's own powerhouses, he would have been defeated as well. Seems like the Scion did not need any help at all. In the aftermath of the battle, Mongol had lost both his legs and his left arm, while the Scion sustained no injury whatsoever. Surprisingly, he had left the humbled monarch alive and Warworld mostly intact, before disappearing into the vastness of space. Currently, the massive warship is being run by the tyrant's son, while he's being cared for by his private doctors, desperately trying to stay alive. The reason why one of the Scions even decided to venture into the heart of a place as dangerous as Warworld was still being researched by the Corps, but Hal and Superman generally had an idea as to why. And it was something Diana had been searching for months. Mongol's war world was full of advanced weaponry and artifacts, be it physical or magical in nature. The fact that he might have had one of those golden glowing spheres was plausible. Bruce had asked one of his old allies to research the golden glowing orb when Diana had brought it to the watchtower, and she found out that the ball acted as some sort of conduit and was practically useless without others of its kind. This could only mean one thing. Sooner rather than later, the Scions would come back here, just like 5 years ago. As much as he hated to say it, for he was grateful for their help in the past, the Scions were too much of an enigma to truly trust. Besides that, Mongol's humiliation served as a fiery omen of a potential fate of the Earth and its inhabitants when they find out their kin was being experimented on while they were initially searching for that golden sphere. Nothing that Superman knew of could stop their onslaught, not even the combined might of Earth's heroes. Superman wasn't naive. Legally trying to convince the government to free the Scion would take far too long. It was simply not worth the risk. He still did not like it, but it simply had to be done. While the Man of Steel kept staring at the warm and inviting sun with those thoughts lingering in his mind, his earpiece suddenly started to beep. Superman, this is Batman calling in. The meeting is starting shortly. The stoic voice of his best friend echoed throughout the comm. Superman sighed deeply, before replying. I'm coming, give me a few seconds. With hardly a second to spare, Superman started to descend. With an incredible display of speed, he landed quickly, yet gracefully on the pavement just in front of the United States Capitol. His heart filled up with slight wonder upon seeing the massive, white, neoclassical building. Just like when he was a child and went on a school trip there. All around him, he heard people chanting his name. Some even insulted him, but when he looked at their direction, they quickly looked away. Sometimes, Superman truly felt like an outcast. As much as he tried to remain by his human values, things like this always reminded him that he was just an alien trying to be different. As Superman shook his head at his dreary thoughts and walked up the steps towards the Capitol, he was greeted by something that had become all too familiar when these two were together. I'm sorry, Steve, but what we had. It is not working anymore. A beautiful woman wearing a tiara stated to a broad man. Crystal clear blue eyes looked on rather difficultly as she brushed her raven hair with her hand. She was wearing a red, sleeveless breastplate outlined with silver, and a blue leotard. Her legs were almost fully exposed, with the exception of knee-high steel boots. On her belt, she had a sword sheathed and a golden lasso. She was Diana of Themyscira, better known as Wonder Woman to the outside world. Diana. The man she was talking to replied with downcast eyes. He was wearing a black military suit, with lots of different medals of service embedded on his chest. He too, brushed his hair, which was colored a light blonde. His eyes were the same color as Diana, a vibrant blue. When they noticed Superman approach, the two immediately forced a reassuring smile towards him. Akal, good of you to come. Diana replied as she gave him a quick hug. I'm heading inside the Capitol, I'll see you both soon. The Amazon immediately stated as she walked away. Superman quickly turned back towards the person known as Steve, who sighed heavily. I don't know what to do, Superman. I can't seem to get over her, but every advance I make falls on deaf ears. She just wants to be good friends, but I don't know if I can do that. Superman could only sympathize with that. Love was just difficult. He himself didn't even know what his relationship with Lois was. She was completely fangirling over Superman, yet was the best friend of Clark Kent. He had been desiring a relationship with her, but how would she react if she realized that her crush and best friend were the same person? I can't help you with that, Mr. Trevor. I have some problems of my own as well. I can talk to Diana about it, if you wish, but her heart hasn't been in the right place for a long time. Superman answered as he and Steve slowly walked towards the Capitol building. What do you mean? Wait, is she still thinking about? Steve began, to which Clark nodded. Their disappearance does not sit well with her, and ever since she heard of Argus holding one of their species in captivity, She's been hell-bent on getting him out. Whatever her feelings are, only she knows. She's always been the most mysterious of us, despite valuing honesty and the truth. Maybe that's how it is. Superman ended with a thought. What are you implying? Steve questioned as he and Clark turned around upon suddenly hearing many of the guards readying their weapons. Mentally, Clark's sweat dripped at the display in the distance. Maybe she doesn't know what to feel herself, and is trying to find out. You go ahead and talk to the rest of the League, I'll deal with this. Superman ended as he rushed towards the scene. Let me go right now, I have every right to be here. A woman in a tight, purple pencil skirt and matching blouse growled as she was being restrained by two heavily armored guards. Gentlemen, I'll take it from here. Superman ushered in kindly as the guards turned to the Man of Steel. Is she speaking the truth, Superman? One of them asked, to which Lois snorted. Yes, Miss Lane is speaking true. She's given special permission to attend the meeting. Thank you for guiding her towards me. Clark stated with his signature smile, to which the two guards nodded. Quickly, Superman dragged Lois towards the Capitol, while also starting to speak. Lois, if you wanted to come, why didn't you just ask me to bring you here? Saved you the hassle of forcing yourself through the massive crowd. Superman sighed as Lois momentarily stopped to place her hands on her hips, an angry frown on her beautiful face. I tried to call my friend Clark, because he had the invite with him that ensured us access towards the Capitol. The bastard never answered his phone. Lois growled. Superman almost gulped, but remembered to stay in character. Let me speak to your friend later. Superman stated with a forced smile. You better, because his lateness annoys me to no end. Maybe you can talk some sense into him, you at least, arrived just in time. Lois smiled admirably. Yeah. Superman chuckled sheepishly as the two appeared before a handsome man who was as tall as Superman. Good day, Miss Lane. The man greeted as his blue eyes stared deeply into the reporter's. Good day to you too, Mr. Wayne. Lois replied, not being swayed in the slightest. She knew damn well that this man, with his sleek black hair and vibrant blue eyes, was known for his womanizing charms. Instead of talking to the man, she quickly took notes of her surroundings and the many different people that were led into the Capitol. Lois, would it be alright if I talk to Mr. Wayne in private? Superman asked as he shook the man's hand. Don't leave me waiting for too long, boys. Metropolis' most famous reporter replied as she headed inside on her own, with Superman and Mr. Wayne slowly following behind her, not keeping up with her pace. The two watched as Lois eventually started to interview a few of the people here, before finally starting their conversation. We have a problem, Cal. Bruce whispered as the two headed into one of the quiet corridors to talk. Waller's not there yet? Superman asked as Bruce shook his head. Your children are bickering more than saving the innocent metas and aliens at Belle Rev? Superman then asked, to which Bruce sighed. Don't remind me, but no. All is going fine, as of now. The problem lies here. Bruce stated as he showed Superman camera footage of the meeting chamber on his phone. Someone immediately stuck out. He was sitting at the front, next to Amanda Waller and the alien known as Wraith. What is Lex Luthor doing here? Superman hissed as the two headed out of the corridor to head towards the meeting. I fear that tempers are going to rise with him sitting there. Waller's got guts for getting him out of prison just for this moment. Bruce growled as the two finally arrived in front of the massive door where the stage was set. Superman still remembered vividly how Lex manipulated things to gain favor from Brainiac, just before the time Darkseid attacked. He has been in prison for his treachery ever since, but it seems Waller managed to get him out just for this occasion. Superman's odds of a successful plea to shut down Belle Rev's laboratory were practically non-existent now, so now the biggest responsibility fell on Batman. Bruce, you do realize that if this goes wrong, they will hold you as the scapegoat? Superman finally asked as the two watched Lois Lane approach. I know. Batman simply replied as they shook each other's hands to pretend they did not know each other well. Are you done? Lois asked as she arrived next to the two, her notebook already full of theories, thoughts and general notes. Let's get inside. Superman replied as he opened the door of the chamber. Immediately uncountable eyes turned towards the three across the entire Senate chamber. Superman could easily pick out the relieved smiles of his Justice League colleagues. Aquaman was with his red-haired wife Mara. The Flash was accompanied one of Central City's most prominent reporters, a brunette named Iris West. Green Lantern had one of his human colleagues from the Corps with him, an Afro-American named John Stewart, who was also an architect and a retired soldier. Even Cyborg was here, together with his father. Superman's gaze then shifted towards the rest of the crowd. He could pick out wealthy businessmen like Oliver Queen, who was actually Green Arrow, Michael Holt, and even someone as notorious as Oswald Cobblepot. Many United Nations officials were here as well as highly placed military officials such as General Sam Lane, to Clark usually known as Lois' father, who disliked his Superman persona greatly. Before long, however, his eyes got fixated on the trio of people who were already sitting at the defendant's side of the room. As Superman headed towards the front to take his seat at the complainant's side, where Diana and Steve were already sitting, he kept his gaze firmly plastered on a smirking Lex Luthor. The bald man was still in his prison suit, with cuffs on and under heavy security, but that did not make him any less dangerous. Then, the Man of Steel's gaze momentarily shifted towards the being known as Wraith. In a way, Superman could certainly understand why he would be mistaken for Darkseid's son. The fury inside the alien's gaze was almost the same, but the color of his skin was just slightly odd. Darkseid didn't have orange-colored energy in the form of a star on his chest either. When Superman turned to Amanda Waller, he was surprised to see her looking rather nervous. She usually looked cold and calculating. Did she know that Batman's sidekicks were infiltrating her base of operations? Another thing that he found strange was the fact that Amanda looked surprisingly fit. The last time he saw her in person, she was close to morbid obesity. It was almost as if she looked and acted like a completely different person. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Superman immediately looked in front of him to see the President of the United States sitting on the spot which the Senate chairman usually took. This man, unlike his predecessor, was a more progressive person when it came to the U.S. and its affairs, both domestic and international. He was accompanied by his Vice President and Secretary of Defense. He complied with the man's request, and proceeded to sit between Steve and Diana, the former looking nervous while the latter kept her fierce gaze directed at Wraith. Why is Lex Luthor here? Steve asked as Superman momentarily looked behind him to see Bruce Wayne playing with his phone at the back of the room, probably directing orders at his children. Amanda probably bought him out for a day, just for this occasion. Superman then replied, logically, because most people are bound to lose a confrontation of wits with him. Then why's Batman not here? Steve asked urgently as he scratched his head. Don't worry, Steve. Batman's here, just not in the way you expect him to be. Besides, we don't need him to speak. I'm sure that we can sort this out ourselves. Diana answered confidently. Indeed. I've dealt with Luthor before. I probably know him better than anyone. Superman ended as he turned his gaze at the President, who slammed his wooden hammer on his desk table and motioned everyone to focus on him. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to this unique occasion. This day will be the most important one in the history of not only the United States of America, but the whole world as well. It is up to both parties to set aside their differences to ensure a brighter future to us all, one where barriers between humans, metahumans and aliens do not exist. The President stated as he addressed everyone inside the room. Everyone remained quiet as the President did his speech, except for one. It was merely a snort, but that made the entire room tense up. Mr. Luthor, is there anything that you would like to share with us before we begin? The President asked gravely, while Luthor waved his hand rather dismissively at him. Oh, just that the idea of a nation where superpowered individuals who destroy property, works of wonder and even lives on a whim can coexist with general humans is utter farce. But please, do continue. Lex Luthor answered with a yawn as many accusatory glances were subsequently directed at him. Thank you for your optimism, Mr. Luthor. It seems that your days in prison has given you a much brighter outlook on life. The president replied with a bemused tone. Superman smiled slightly at that. At least the president seemed genuine at trying to end this predicament peacefully. Now, Superman, I believe you have something to share about our golden saviors from 5 years ago, something that you weren't ready to share until now. The president ended steadfastly as he motioned towards Superman to stand up. Well, here we go. Steve muttered as Superman began to speak up. Tilde Ho Belle Rev Louisiana. While the entire world held its breath as the most powerful man on the planet opened up about the League's biggest held secret, an experienced individual in the arts of stealth was quietly navigating through the air vents of a certain underground facility. The lawsuit that attracted the most powerful and influential beings on the planet was the perfect distraction, one that would give this man and his co-workers just enough time to prevent hypothetical disaster. The mission he was assigned to was arguably the most important one in the history of human life. If this failed, it could be the end of this planet as well. Although this person, clad in a black bodysuit containing a symbol of a blue bird on his chest, a blue face mask, and an utility belt containing various different gadgets, was completely focused on the mission and understanding of the potential threat, most of his colleagues were less so. Guys, look at your bat watches. Daddy's messaged us. One more ridiculing sentence and I'll cut off your tongue, Todd. Take that back, you meanie, or I'll tell Daddy. Todd. I'll fucking. Guys, stop fighting, we need you focused. Red Robin's right. Red Hood, stop patronizing, and Robin, watch your language. Ugh, guys. Sort this out later and focus on the mission. Nightwing, more commonly known as Richard Dick Grayson, sighed as a growl from Barbara, aka Batgirl, came through the comm. Usually he was the one who made the annoying jokes during tense situations, but the insidiousness of this mission was far too important to ignore. Looking at his bat watch, Nightwing quickly read the message his mentor gave him. Well, I guess the importance of our mission just spiked, guys. How did Waller manage to free Lex Luthor? American bureaucracy at its finest. Batgirl replied dejectedly. Can't we just put a bullet through that guy's head? For once I agree with the black sheep. Let's kill your grandfather too while we're at it. That's it, Todd, I will slam every single tooth out of your revolting mouth with a crowbar after this is over. Not this again. Dick could hear Red Robin, or Tim Drake, sigh as Red Hood and Robin were at it again for the umpteenth time. Guys, if you don't focus now, I'll spoil the next Game of Thrones episode. Dick replied towards everyone. Immediately he heard the desired response. That's low, Dick. Red Hood growled, also known as Jason Todd. You will not, Grayson. Countermeasures will be applied if you. Everyone, shut up and focus. Dick winced as Batgirl's screech echoed through his earpiece. Still, it was a good thing because everyone remained quiet as of now. Dick quickly used the time to navigate through the dark vents. It was a tight fit, but as a gymnast this felt more or less the same as walking through a 2-meter tall door. Nightwing, where are you now? Batgirl asked as Nightwing opened his holographic map. Close to the prison cells it seems. My biorhythmic scanners don't show any guards in here at all. Thought this place was going to be protected better than this. Dick answered as he peeked through one of the openings. The halls were eerily white, just like those secret laboratories you usually see in movies about extraterrestrials. Most of Argus security is currently at the Capitol. Still see a few droids here and there, though, so be careful. I've locked onto your signal, so I can open any doors and disable any cameras and traps while you're on your way. Barbara replied as Dick slipped through one of the openings and scanned the hall for any stray guards. When he realized that the coast was clear, he jumped towards the floor. Like a cat, he landed gracefully and quietly on his forelimbs and quickly scanned the doors for sudden activity. Nightwing was glad to have someone as talented and amazing as Barbara watching his back through the security systems. She and Tim managed to hack through the advanced security protocols of this underground facility in less than 30 minutes, which was absolutely insane. Unfortunately, Belle Rev's security system was constantly being overwritten and rebooted by its AI, forcing Tim and Barbara to remain at the Batcave to prevent countermeasures from the hacked system. They didn't like the lack of field work, but it was a necessary burden. As Nightwing moved through the White Halls, he eventually picked up something peculiar. In front of him stood a massive titanium door, and his scanner told him of strange activity. "There's something behind this door. Can you open it?" Nightwing asked quietly as he grabbed one of his Eskrima sticks, just in case. "Just a minute, had to disable a few androids due to Jason and Damian not being careful enough. Their constant bickering has almost compromised the mission," Barbara answered through the comm with a growl. That's it, please comment for a part 3.